Welcome, brave souls, to a journey into the darkest corners of history. Tonight, we peel back the veil on torture devices, so cruel they defy imagination. What you are about to hear isn't myth or legend, but reality. Pain turned into spectacle, fear forged into power. Stay with us as we step into the shadows of a world where suffering itself was engineered. The screams finally faded after 3 long days, not because death mercifully claimed the victim, but because the human body has undeniable limits. The vocal cords, strained beyond endurance, would simply fail, leaving only a wet, rasping wheeze that could barely carry the agony endured. Executioners at the Tower of London knew this grim fact intimately. They kept exhaustive records the moment the first scream erupted, the time of confession, the precise second the voice gave out completely, and when the eyes glazed over, even as the heart continued to stubbornly beat within the tortured chest. Every detail was documented with meticulous precision. Medieval torture devices are familiar from movies The Iron Maiden, with its cruel spikes, the rack stretching bodies until joints painfully popped. Yet Hollywood props hardly capture the unbearable reality endured in stone chambers beneath castles across Europe, where every sound echoed the suffering of the condemned. These instruments were designed with shocking sophistication, far beyond simple cruelty. Their creators understood human anatomy, calculating exactly how much pressure a bone could withstand before splintering, and where to place sharp edges to prolong consciousness while systematically dismantling a body over hours or days. Let me take you through 11 such devices that redefined suffering itself. We start with one so ingeniously cruel that condemned prisoners sometimes resorted to biting their own tongues to escape the unending torment, the infamous rack. The rack appeared deceptively simple, a wooden frame with rollers at each end, ankles tied to one roller, wrists to the other, a crank ready to stretch the human form. Yet those who wielded it understood the terrifying precision it required. The Duke of Exeter introduced this device to the Tower of London in 1420. The executioner's assistant placed a hand on the chest of the victim, feeling for the precise moment when breathing shifted, when the body recognized the horror that was about to unfold. The first turn of the crank made the rope scream like ship rigging in a fierce storm. Shoulders burned as they strained against their sockets, muscles stretching, tendons groaning under pressure. An agonizing introduction before the real work of breaking the human frame began. With each successive turn, the second, the third, the spine lengthened painfully. Vertebrae separated with wet, echoing pops. Witnesses compared the sound to green wood snapping. Cartilage between the ribs tore. Hip joints dislocated with grinding sensations that victims later described as feeling like shattered glass coursing through their bones. Anne faced the rack in 1546. The Protestant martyr, educated and eloquent, had already endured preliminary questioning. When they placed her on the device, something unprecedented occurred. The regular torturer refused to continue, stating that her joints had already reached the limit, and further pressure would be fatal. The Lord Chancellor himself took control, cranking the device further until her shoulders and hips fully dislocated, her elbows hyperextended backward in grotesque precision. By the time they carried her to the execution chamber, her body could no longer support itself. Yet she refused to utter a single name. Survivors of the rack endured lifelong consequences. Ligaments stretched past their breaking point, joints became fragile and easily dislocated. Spines elongated but crooked, and nerves permanently damaged. Many developed chronic conditions, their muscles perpetually contorting in sudden pain, a lifelong echo of medieval cruelty. Compared to what came next, the rack seemed almost merciful, offering a grim swiftness. The Spanish donkey, however, was designed for slow, methodical, relentless agony. It could prolong torment over days, inflicting unbearable pain with surgical precision. Imagine a triangular wooden beam, sharpened to a cruel, knife-like edge, mounted on legs like a sawhorse. Victims were placed atop, forced to endure their bodies bending and breaking. Under calculated weight and pressure, each moment measured for maximum suffering, a testament to the chilling ingenuity of medieval engineers. Now imagine being forced to straddle the device completely naked, your full body weight pressing mercilessly on the groin. Victims were hoisted onto the wooden beam, legs spread wide, positioned over the sharpened wedge designed to inflict unbearable pain, almost immediately sending sharp agony through soft tissue and nerve endings that could barely endure. The edge cut deep into flesh quickly. Witnesses described it like a sword slowly driven upward through the body, relentless, excruciating, while torturers sought to increase suffering further. They attached weights to the ankles, starting at 20 pounds, then 40, and 60, driving the wedge deeper. Each weight intensified agony while keeping the victim fully conscious. The device attacked the body's most sensitive areas. Men experienced their scrotum splitting painfully. Women endured pelvic bones, separating under relentless pressure, every movement magnifying their suffering. Eventually, the wooden edge reached the tailbone, sometimes splitting it entirely. Accounts noted that within 2 hours, a man's ability to father children could be permanently destroyed. After 4 hours, victims lost bladder and bowel control permanently. The wooden beam severed essential nerves, and by 6 hours, the pelvis itself began to crack audibly. The Spanish Inquisition used this device on women accused of adultery or witchcraft. Sometimes the wedge was coated with salt or vinegar, adding burning chemical agony to pain. One journal recounts leaving a woman on the device for 3 full days. By the end, hip bones were visible on either side, illustrating extreme mutilation. Many died. Survivors were left permanently disfigured. Walking produced a distinct waddle. Sitting normally became impossible. Psychological trauma persisted with nightmares, decades later, of being split apart again. If the Spanish donkey destroyed from below, the next device assaulted the skull itself, the head crusher. Its design was horrifyingly elegant and devastatingly effective. A metal cap pressed from above a bar held the chin below, and a screw slowly brought them together, crushing bone with deliberate measured pressure that heightened terror. The victim sat carefully, chin resting on the lower bar, while the metal cap was ceremoniously placed atop the skull, allowing full understanding of the impending horror. The torturer turned the screw a quarter turn. Pressure spread across the skull like the world's most intense headache. Another quarter turn, intensified pain, jawbones compressing painfully. As the screw tightened further, weak points of the skull gave way. Teeth exploded outward, or jawbone splintered fragments pierced cheeks, yet the torturer continued calculating every moment of agony. The human skull can withstand roughly 520 pounds of force before fracturing. Each turn brought the victim closer to destruction, a slow, methodical study of anatomy and cruelty. The head crusher could deliver more than 1,500 pounds of crushing force. As pressure increased slowly, the human skull began to deform under the relentless, calculated weight. The temporal bones above the ears were the first to crack tiny fractures, spreading like spiderwebs across the skull, while echoing noises of breaking bone reverberated through the cold chamber. Next, the occipital bone at the skull's base would splinter with audible, horrifying cracks. Witnesses described the terrifying, gut-wrenching sound as walnuts being crushed, each snap a signal of impending doom. Then came the eyes. With pressure trapped inside the skull, the eyeballs bulged painfully against their sockets, stretched beyond natural limits, every nerve screaming as the skull slowly collapsed. One more turn of the screw could force the eyes entirely from their sockets, dangling by the optic nerves. Some versions of the device had small dishes placed to catch them. The victim remained fully conscious, blind, yet aware of every terrifying sensation. The skull collapsed gradually, each movement delivering precise, calculated agony, designed to break mind and body simultaneously. Records from the Spanish Inquisition recount a Protestant minister in 1563 subjected to the device. The torturers cracked teeth, fractured the jaw, and paused, letting suspense compound the horror. For 6 excruciating hours, they occasionally tapped the metal cap with a hammer, sending shockwaves through his skull. Each tap reverberated as if to announce the torturer's careful, relentless intent. When finally released, the minister's face was unrecognizable, deformed beyond recognition. Even his wife failed to identify him. He confessed to every demand, broken mentally and physically under systematic torture. Survivors endured permanent injuries, shattered jaws that never fully healed chronic headaches, skull deformities, blindness from optic nerve damage, and frequent seizures, their nervous systems forever altered. Yet even the head crusher was mild compared to the next device, the Judas cradle. Picture a 3-foot iron pyramid, its tip sharpened to the width of a fingertip, awaiting its helpless victims. Victims were hoisted above it, legs forcibly spread and slowly lowered. Gravity became an instrument of methodical torment, forcing the body's most sensitive areas against the sharpened metal tip. The torturers had refined this process into a cruel art. Victims were not dropped suddenly. Instead, they were lowered an inch at a time, prolonging agony, while avoiding immediate fatal damage. Leg muscles cramped under extreme strain as victims struggled to support themselves. Some versions were heated over coals, glowing red, adding burning, cauterizing pain to the mechanical devastation inflicted by the tip. Once lowered, the scorching metal penetrated tissue while cauterizing it, preventing unconsciousness, prolonging awareness, and amplifying suffering. The Spanish Inquisition employed the Judas cradle extensively during the 16th century. One account describes a woman accused of witchcraft held atop the device for 12 hours. Repeated lifting and lowering drove the pyramid deeper, magnifying pain, tearing sensitive tissue slowly and methodically. By the end, the pyramid had penetrated rectum and abdominal cavity. She survived another 3 days before succumbing to septic shock. Internal organs were irreparably damaged, infections spreading uncontrollably throughout her body. Survivors faced lifelong consequences: anal sphincter destruction, permanent incontinence, rectovaginal fistulas in women, and chronic infections. The trauma was both physical and profoundly psychological, leaving lasting scars. The Judas cradle's sexualized nature made it psychologically devastating. This was not merely torture. It was an intimate violation, leaving survivors unable to speak of their experience, carrying shame and trauma for life. The breast ripper escalated sexualized cruelty. Specifically designed to mutilate women, it consisted of 4 heated iron claws, capable of piercing skin and mammary tissue, producing slow, excruciating pain. Claws were clamped onto the breast and with deliberate force pulled. Skin fat and mammary tissue were torn apart, gradually, methodically ripping the breast entirely from the woman's body. This process was agonizingly slow, each second, prolonged to intensify terror and suffering, leaving victims permanently mutilated and psychologically scarred. The cruelty was precise, methodical, and inescapable. The torturer manipulated the claws with painstaking slowness, sometimes taking several minutes to extract a single breast. Each fiber of tissue tore under methodical, deliberate force. If the iron tips were heated, the chamber filled with acrid smoke and the stench of burning flesh, intensifying terror. Some women fainted, only to be revived and subjected further. The procedure continued with the other breast. The device served as both punishment and a symbolic attack on womanhood, targeting their perceived transgressions against morality or social order. It struck at identity as well as flesh, ensuring the inflicted horror endured in memory. Pain was compounded with shame, leaving survivors permanently marked and psychologically scarred. A more extreme variant, the wall-mounted iron spider, forced women against spiked claws embedded in stone. They were pulled away, leaving breasts impaled, a grotesque display of calculated suffering. Historical records from 15th century Germany detail a woman accused of adultery facing this horror. The heated claws glowed white-hot before penetrating tissue, sending searing pain through her body. Witnesses recalled the crackling sound echoing through the chamber, prolonging anticipation and terror. The torturer pulled gradually, taking nearly 10 excruciating minutes, maximizing both physical torment and mental despair. Though the woman survived the initial ordeal, she succumbed to infection 3 days later. Her chest was left exposed to the bone, a grim reminder of medieval precision in cruelty. Those who lived endured permanent disfigurement, chronic infections, and wounds that never properly healed. The lasting physical mutilation reinforced social stigma and ensured psychological trauma endured for life. These women bore visible proof of supposed crimes, shunned by communities, often forbidden to remarry, living as isolated outcasts, a constant reminder of their pain and societal condemnation. The pair of anguish introduced an entirely internalized form of torture. Constructed from 4 metal segments and controlled by a screw, it could expand gradually within the body. In its closed state, the device was smooth enough for insertion into bodily cavities. Once positioned, gradual turning of the screw forced the segments to expand like deadly mechanical petals. The instrument was adaptable in the mouths of heretics. It dislocated jaws, tore lips, and fractured teeth or bone. Inserted vaginally or anally, it shredded delicate internal tissue with agonizing precision. The true terrors lay in control. A quarter turn induced discomfort, half a turn severe pain, and full expansion ruptured tissue permanently. The torturer dictated the progression with meticulous care. Hours could pass with the device in place. Incremental adjustments increased suffering, causing bleeding nerve damage and permanent internal injury. Each turn magnified agony while ensuring conscious awareness throughout. Spanish Inquisition records describe the device used on a woman accused of consorting with the devil, illustrating methodical, sustained torment, engineered to break body, mind, and spirit alike. The pair of anguish was carefully inserted vaginally, then expanded gradually over 6 long hours. Each rotation of the screw intensified agony as delicate tissue stretched and tore relentlessly. By the end, internal damage was catastrophic, causing continuous hemorrhaging for days. She confessed to every accusation, broken in body and spirit, yet succumbed to infection a week later. The hidden internal nature of these wounds made the pair of anguish especially insidious. Unlike visible injuries, medieval medicine could do nothing to prevent infection or stop ongoing internal trauma. Survivors often developed fistulas, abnormal organ connections causing incontinence or unending pain. The device's cruel design ensured prolonged suffering long after initial extraction, leaving permanent physical and psychological damage. Next, the breaking wheel turned execution into public theater. Victims were tied to a large wooden wheel, limbs threaded through the spokes, immobilized for systematic bone destruction. The executioner began with the shins moving upward to arms, striking with iron hammers. Each bone was broken meticulously, the victim writhing in unimaginable agony as the crowd observed silently. Once shattered, the wheel was hoisted upright on a pole, exposing the victim to sun, wind, and rain. Limbs twisted unnaturally through spokes, still alive, sometimes hanging for days as insects infested open wounds. Crows would peck at exposed eyes, while flies laid eggs in torn flesh. Onlookers witnessed slow death through shock dehydration and exposure, the spectacle reinforcing fear and obedience among the populace. Judges often specified the number of blows. A merciful execution might include a final fatal strike, but severe crimes required prolonged suffering. Victims were to remain alive on the wheel as long as possible. In 1589, Peter Stump, the so-called werewolf of Bedburg, faced the breaking wheel for murder and cannibalism. Red-hot pincers tore flesh from his body before bones were broken in 10 places. He endured hours of unimaginable agony, his body contorted into an impossible pretzel before the final beheading. His corpse was burned, yet the public spectacle remained a gruesome lesson to witnesses. The broken bodies were left displayed for weeks. Birds nested in rib cages, bones bleached under the sun. Eventually, only skeletal remains still woven through the wheel's spokes testified to medieval cruelty. Even the breaking wheel's drawn-out public agony could not surpass the efficiency and horror of the next device, the saw. A simple carpenter's tool became one of history's most terrifying execution methods. Victims were suspended upside down by the ankles, ensuring continued blood flow to the brain, prolonging consciousness far beyond what upright suspension would allow. The executioners positioned a large two-man saw at the groin. The blade first severed genitals, then cut into the pelvis. Each deliberate stroke drove terror and pain deeper. Suspended inverted victims did not lose consciousness quickly from blood loss. The heart continued pumping blood to the brain, even as the lower body was systematically bisected. Some reportedly remained conscious until the saw reached the navel. The torturers worked methodically, saw moving back and forth each pass, slicing deeper, prolonging suffering with precision and cruel intent. Executioners often paused mid-act, not out of mercy, but to wipe bone dust from the blade. These interruptions heightened fear, stretching moments into endless torment. Every stroke of the saw tore flesh, shredded nerves, cracked bones. The victim felt every vibration, every shred of pain echoing inside ribs and spine. Agony unfolded deliberately. First the skin split, then cartilage snapped, then organs ruptured. Pain traveled like fire through the body each second, unbearable, each breath shorter. A chilling record from medieval Persia describes a prince enduring this fate. Executioners were ordered to saw slowly enough to keep him alive throughout the ordeal. The process lasted over an hour. For 20 minutes, his screams rang across the square. Later, gurgling moans replaced them as blood filled his throat. Witnesses reported his eyes never closed. They darted frantically wet with tears reflecting horror until his body finally failed. The stare haunted bystanders for years. Sawing was not only about suffering, but also spectacle. Splitting a body into halves meant nothing recognizable remained. Burial became impossible, dignity forever denied. Often the halves were displayed separately, hung from gates or towers. Citizens were forced to look, reminded of the price of defiance against rulers' authority. But no single device captured imagination like the Iron Maiden. The name suggested mystery, almost poetry, but its function belonged to nightmares beyond reason. The Iron Maiden was shaped like a human coffin forged from iron. Inside, countless spikes waited, positioned with precision to penetrate without granting quick release. The arrangement avoided instant death. Victims were pierced in dozens of places, yet spared vital arteries, forcing slow bleeding organ collapse and hours of conscious terror. The infamous Nuremberg Iron Maiden had spikes aimed deliberately at the eyes, throat, chest, and groin. Closing the door guaranteed unbearable torment from every angle. Once inside, darkness swallowed the victim. The metal coffin amplified echoes of screams, turning them into metallic howls. Some designs carried sounds outside, distorted, almost inhuman. Witnesses described the horror of listening. Distorted cries seemed unearthly, spreading fear, even among hardened onlookers who had grown accustomed to executions. Some accounts claimed executioners periodically opened the door. They inspected wounds, confirmed consciousness, then shut the coffin again, stretching agony further, ensuring absolute hopelessness. The Iron Maiden united claustrophobia, impalement, and prolonged suffering. It symbolized human creativity, twisted entirely toward cruelty, leaving behind legends that horrify even centuries later. Then came impalement, perfected by Vlad III of Wallachia. Known as Vlad the Impaler, he wielded this punishment not only for execution, but for domination through terror. The stake was monstrous, 8 to 10 feet long, thick as a man's arm. Its tip deliberately dulled or greased, designed for slow entry without instant death. Victims were laid flat, forced to endure as the stake was inserted into anus or vagina. Pain began immediately, but survival stretched into hours, even days. Vlad's executioners were disturbingly skilled. They threaded the stake carefully through the body, avoiding lungs and heart, weaving past organs, like surgeons of cruelty. The stake emerged through shoulder or neck. Then executioners raised it upright, planting it into earth, leaving the victim suspended above the crowd. Gravity dragged the body downward inch by inch. Each movement tore tissues, widened wounds, and deepened agony. Victims screamed until their voices broke into silence. Death arrived slowly. Some lingered for days, suspended in horrifying stillness, eyes open, body trembling. The crowd watched as humanity drained from them piece by piece. Impalement became Vlad's dark signature. Fields of wooden stakes dotted his lands, each holding a writhing or lifeless body, forming forests of terror to break enemies' will. The victims slid downward slowly, inch by inch, their own weight forcing the stake deeper. Progress was merciless, every heartbeat dragging them further into torment. Death arrived through many paths, blood-draining infection, spreading organs failing, and exposure gnawing away. Each second stretched agony, leaving victims praying for a release denied. Birds descended, early clawing eyes, tearing skin while breath still lingered. Feathers brushed against trembling flesh, transforming execution grounds into grotesque banquets shared between beasts and men. Executioners sometimes tied blocks beneath victims, preventing quick descent. This cruel restraint ensured the body remained upright, prolonging suffering, forcing hours or days of relentless misery. In 1462, Vlad unveiled his most dreadful spectacle. When Sultan Mehmed II marched toward Târgoviște, he discovered not soldiers, but 20,000 corpses displayed as trophies. Men, women, children, all impaled. Rows stretched endlessly like wooden forests, each body frozen in varying decay, a ghastly city of death erected outside the gates. The tallest stake bore Hamza Pasha, Ottoman commander. Rank dictated height, nobles elevated above peasants, so even in torment, Vlad enforced his hierarchy through staggering cruelty. The Ottoman army, hardened by wars, and even Constantinople's conquest, faltered. Confronted with fields of screaming and rotting bodies, they recoiled, refusing to storm the capital. Chroniclers whispered that some still lived voices weak, gasping. Their moans merged into a dreadful choir, echoing through the valley, vibrating like wind through graveyards. The stench poisoned the air. Blood feces, putrefying flesh blended into a nauseating fog. Travelers swore they smelled Vlad's forest of stakes from miles away. Even Sultan Mehmed, veteran of countless wars, gagged. Reports claim he vomited at the sight, then ordered retreat, unwilling to clash with a ruler so merciless. Vlad reveled in terror. He dined beside impaled victims, sipping wine, while their screams harmonized with clinking silver. To him, dinner and death were inseparable companions. One tale describes foreign envoys who complained of the stench. Vlad, amused, ordered them raised on taller stakes, jesting they'd enjoy fresher air from above. During his reign, estimates suggest 40 to 100,000 suffered impalement. Vlad transformed execution into theater, a stage drenched in blood designed to paralyze entire nations. Yet cruelty evolved further in Greece. The brazen bull, forged by Perillos of Athens for tyrant Phalaris, embodied suffering, reimagined not through bloodshed, but by fire. The device appeared majestic, a life-sized bronze bull, gleaming in sunlight, hollow within. A small door allowed victims to be sealed inside, trapped with no escape. Once secured, flames were lit beneath the belly. Heat spread through bronze, cooking flesh from outside in. Victims endured roasting slowly, skin blistering, lungs searing. Its horror lay not only in pain, but sound. Pipes hidden in the bull's head, reshaped screams into bellowing, mimicking the voice of a living beast. As torment escalated, the bull seemed alive, its nostrils spewing smoke, its mouth echoing monstrous cries. Crowds witnessed a terrifying illusion. Metal transforming agony into music. Legend claims Perillos demonstrated his invention personally, but Phalaris betrayed him, locking the door, lighting fire, making the creator first victim of his metallic monstrosity. Pulled out before death, Perillos was hurled off a cliff. The lesson endured: inventors of torment were never shielded from the very cruelty they crafted. The brazen bull killed not swiftly but artistically. Heat suffocated lungs, roasted organs, charred skin. It was not execution alone, but performance cruelty sculpted into spectacle. At first, unbearable heat scorched flesh. Skin bubbled, blistered, cracked. Each breath seared lungs as if inhaling flame. Victims quickly realized death would not come mercifully. As bronze heated, further bodies transformed grotesquely. Muscles charred fat, melted fluids boiled beneath blistering skin. Victims were fried slowly, their own essence turned into fuel for agony. Eventually, rising temperature reached organs. Hearts weakened, lungs collapsed, kidneys boiled inside. Shock flooded systems while pain refused release. It was death through transformation, human bodies cooked alive. The cruelty wasn't merely physical, it was staged performance. Pain became spectacle artistry twisted. Victims' cries weren't cries anymore. They were manipulated into monstrous bellowing of bronze. Crowds gathered eagerly. They watched smoke stream from nostrils, listened as Bull roared louder with every scream. To them, horror was theater death, reimagined as carnival. Such machines weren't punishments alone. They were weapons of terror. Each design aimed to annihilate body and spirit together, breaking resistance before rebellion could even spark. Here, intelligence turned monstrous. Ingenuity, once destined for creation, redirected into methods of torment. Human creativity became corrupted, every new device pushing boundaries of cruelty further. Operators of such devices acted with chilling precision. They observed, documented, measured endurance. Notes recorded patterns, minutes, until fainting hours, until collapse thresholds, where hope dissolved entirely. Knowledge was preserved meticulously. Techniques handed down across generations adjusted, refined. Torture wasn't chaos. It was institutional science, perfected, like craft, with suffering as ultimate currency. This was more than execution, it was profession. Pain became occupation, cruelty an industry. Men dedicated lifetimes to ensuring torment remained efficient, consistent, terrifyingly reliable. And the terrible truth, it succeeded. Devices worked exactly as conceived. Screams yielded confessions, empty, meaningless confessions, yet enough to justify cruelty. Results mattered, truth did not. Fear spread farther than swords ever could. Populations submitted willingly, trembling at possibility of capture. Torture didn't only punish it, governed, ensuring obedience through memory of screams. Stories endured, passed like inheritance. Tales of bulls, bellowing bodies, impaled souls broken. These legends etched warnings into memory shadows, haunting societies centuries after last execution. Torture chambers weren't hidden. They weren't shameful secrets. They stood within courthouses beside rulers' halls, woven into law, sanctioned by judges, legitimized as justice made flesh. Executioners weren't viewed as monsters. They were state employees, civil servants on salary, sometimes pensioned. Bureaucracy of cruelty ensured torment operated smoothly with paperwork and payroll. Crowds weren't outsiders either. They were ordinary citizens, farmers, merchants, mothers bringing children to watch justice unfold. Entertainment and discipline merged in the theater of human suffering. Those screams have long faded, echoes remain. They linger in memory and legend, in whispered warnings. Torture may have ended physically, but its psychological shadow endures eternally. The echoes of these tortures remind us how far humanity can fall. If this dark journey fascinated you, support the channel by liking, sharing, and subscribing, so more forgotten horrors may be uncovered.